So I don't think it's a secret to say that Microsoft and Sony are pretty much in cruise control at this point going into the next generation. And it's pretty obvious, and I don't think anyone's going to say otherwise, that Microsoft got pretty badly trounced this generation by Sony, and Nintendo's even probably going to be passing the Xbox One in terms of overall system sales probably by the end of next year. So it's pretty obvious that Microsoft, yeah, they're probably ready to move on. And after E3, where Phil Spencer outright said that Scarlett was being worked on, essentially saying, hey, yeah, we're already thinking about the next generation, and now we're going into 2019, hearing about some games from Microsoft and some games from Sony, but even Sony, it's pretty obvious they're thinking about next generation since they are pretty much skipping E3 and even the PlayStation experience. So we're going to have this interesting gap year in 2019 where we're not going to hear about a lot of new games going into 2020. We're more than likely just going to hear about the new systems and maybe some teases about some upcoming games and some from third parties, of course. But there's been a lot of developments recently about what we can expect from the next Xbox. I mean, like a ton of stuff, because it sounds like there's going to be multiple projects from Microsoft starting to surface over the next 14 to 15 months that we're going to be hearing about and probably even seeing them. So what can we expect to start seeing here going forward? Well, Brad Sams did a very good video. He's over at Thurrott.com, one of the senior editors there. He put this entire chart together that we're going to check out. And I'm going to leave a link to his video and tons of source articles down there if you would like to read further about all of this stuff, because there is a lot to unpack here, and it's going to be very difficult even to be able to do this in a condensed video. So this is the chart that he put out here. We have Xbox at the top. That is the overall brand, of course. To the right, we have the Xbox One S. And then below that is the diskless model that we all pretty much know and figure is coming out first half of next year, and it's going to eliminate the disk drive. It seems more like a test from Microsoft to see if people would be okay with that, or if it would sell well enough to justify maybe doing that the next generation, and then maybe the generation after Scarlett, like 2026, 2027, 2027, we're thinking about not even having disk drives in these systems. That will be an interesting bridge to cross when we get there, but for now, we're all pretty confident a disk drive will exist in the next systems from the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Scarlett. That apparently is codenamed Maverick, and that's an odd name, but okay, sure. They have so many code names that we have to go through here, and there's a lot of stuff here. Now, below that, you'll see is what appears to be like a server blade. They're repurposing the Xbox Ones, the Xbox One S specifically, and fitting them into server blades for Project xCloud that we know of. They've told us about xCloud. That's going to be kicked off into beta at the beginning of next year, 2019. So in a few months, we'll actually probably be able to try these, and they always pointed at cell phones, so I guess this is specifically going to be a thing for cell phones. Sure. And then, of course, they'll probably put it on as many devices as they can, because that's the overall idea, is to have xCloud streamable on everything. So that's kind of the right side where we are now. The Xbox One S that you can buy, Maverick that's coming out, the diskless one, and eventually getting to a point where it's repurposed and fit into blades that you then play remotely on your cell phone. That's kind of where we are now with the current generation and what's to come there. But on the left is where things get interesting, and it's what a lot of people are very interested in. Because, of course, at the top is Scarlett. That is, as Brad Sams put it, the umbrella. Cool. Below that is Danta, which is an odd name, but all right, we'll go with that. Code names rarely make sense, but sure, Danta. That is for the dev kit. Now, dev kits, of course, are things we don't, as consumers, don't usually know about or hear about or even see unless they show it to us. Microsoft did that weird thing where they hyped up the Xbox One X to no end, so they even showed us the dev kits with a little LCD screen, if you remember that. That's actually something I think would have been kind of neat to be on the system, but okay. Below that, though, is where things get very interesting, because it seems like Microsoft is going to have several systems next generation. It appears that they're launching at least with two. I say at least because the one below that, that's the streaming box, we don't even really know if that's coming out day one or if that's going to be staggered and come out like later, like the following year. But we have two different splits. We have one called Anaconda and one called Lockhart. Now, Lockhart is going to be the cheaper model, whereas Anaconda is going to be the ridiculous, nothing's off the table here model, where they're looking to really push the envelope. The pricing is where I'm not really sure, because it appears that they're both going to share the same architecture as we would expect, because games have to work across the board. Sure, that's kind of how it is now with the Xbox One base and the Xbox One X. If the games play across them because they share the same CPU, something we assume is going to happen here, it's fine. If you don't want to spend the money on the super, ultra deluxe version system that plays 4K 60 or whatever, you can get the lower end model that's like 1080 60. That's kind of the idea that they're coming with, is a staggered or a tiered release, I should say. Staggered for that streaming box that we'll talk about, but tiered for the hardware. It's not new. We saw it with the 360 and we saw it with the PS3. Do you remember the 360 came out and you could get the arcade, or I think it was the Pro? I think it was called a Pro. But you get the arcade or the one that came with the 20 gigabyte hard drive. Remember, the arcade came with no hard drive space. You would just get it, and then you would get a memory card that you could buy. Sometimes they would bundle them, but for the most part, you had to buy a memory card, and that was a way for you to be able to get it cheaper than if you got the $100 20 gigabyte hard drive. So I'm not surprised. The PlayStation 3 also had a tiered release. If you remember, you could get a 20 gigabyte drive in your PlayStation 3 with no Wi-Fi, or the 60 gigabyte with Wi-Fi. So if they can bring these out, one is, I'm not kidding, one's 600 and one's 400, because I still think 400 is the sweet spot for most systems when they come out, and 600 is like the beast one, then they can get away with it because they have that $400 entry point. Now, they could also go 500, 300, but I question how powerful the Anaconda could actually be at 300. So we have Anaconda, and then we have Lockhart, and then at the bottom there we have our streaming box. Now, the streaming box, there's still a lot of questions around that one. We assume, because there are some rumors out there about specs for Microsoft's next system that's going to be like Zen 2 and use some sort of newer type GPU that AMD is working on. We assume they're going to be custom in some way. So it's very hard to pinpoint specs for these things because of that. Like the Xbox One X was believed to use Ryzen. It still ends up using the Jaguar cores, but they baked DirectX 12 directly into it, and they squeezed 6 teraflops out of it, which was pretty impressive. This is going to be interesting with the streaming box, because we do have rumors about what it could be using, and it would be using something next generation that appears to be AMD's Ryzen, well, their Picasso APU. Now, the Picasso APU, okay, it's their next generation APU that is going to be lower power. It's going to be the next generation APU that they're working on. We do have some leaked stuff that's come out now, as you're seeing here, that was found on a benchmarking site that appears to have several different models. So it's hard to pinpoint which one of these would be in it. I don't think the streaming box needs more than 4 threads, because the idea is to be low powered and eliminate latency, not necessarily draw every single pixel, every single graphic on your screen by itself. It would be leveraging the cloud to help it. So it doesn't need an ultra powerful system. It needs a low powered, low heat system. I don't think they can put it out without a fan. It's going to need a fan. It won't be fanless like a Raspberry Pi. But I think they can get it to the point where it's not drawing a lot of power, and it'll be tremendously small, if you think about it that way. It probably doesn't need a hard drive. It would use probably flash memory on board, maybe 32 gigabytes. Doesn't need a lot because it's streaming everything. And it would probably not need a lot of RAM. There's a lot of things they can cut the corners on to also make it cheap. In fact, I bet you one of the more expensive things in that box is going to be the controller, as crazy as that sounds. But they could probably get away with something like the 3200U or the 3300U. And this does also have Vega on board as well in kind of an iGPU. So it's interesting to see that, but this is actually what is being rumored to be in that streaming box that would probably be, again, a staggered release, probably a year after it comes out. It would be something, though, if it all came out at once, where there were 3 systems on launch day. However, one would be streaming, and I think that's why they want it to be staggered, because that would be confusing to a lot of people, because it would appear cheap, but then they'd get it home and it wouldn't work. They can get away with the staggered release with one cheaper model, one more expensive model, because they all, at the end of the day, play the same games. You pop the disc in, it'll work the same on either one, just different frame rates and resolution, more than likely. We'll get a reveal on that probably midway through 2019. E3 might be where they do it, or they might want to do their own thing before then and then have a blowout at E3. So we'll see. We'll see if we get to that point, because a lot of people are also pointing to a holiday 2020 launch, which is actually very far off for Microsoft, considering they don't actually have a lot of games announced. Halo, Gears, Crackdown, Ori. for next year. So they would have to start revealing a lot more stuff. Now, I also want to finish up with Picasso. That is a laptop processor, so they will probably be able to get a good TDP of, if they want to do it right, 25 to 35 watts. And that would actually make it very, very low powered and actually pretty efficient. So that'd be pretty neat to see that. Now, the other thing to point out, Windows Central has also been doing a lot of follow-up on this, is to talk about GameCore. That's going to be something that's going to be less about the hardware and more about unifying Windows and Microsoft's Xbox together. So they have, of course, Microsoft Windows and they have Microsoft Xbox, and they want to bring it together so that if you develop for one, it's easy to move between the two. Now, of course, they have UWP, or the Universal Windows Platform, that does help with that already, but they want to go a step further and do something specifically for games called GameCore. And that's going to be something we won't actually see as consumers, but it sounds like it's something that will tremendously help developers to move games back and forth and develop on one, and then it works on the other. So you'll see a lot more Play Anywhere titles, I believe, is the idea, and there's always the possibility that you could start seeing 360 games be backwards compatible on the PC, as well as the Xbox One, original Xbox games even, and you would buy those on the store. Or what would be really cool is if they say, you know what, if you have a disk drive for your PC for whatever reason, you can pop it in, it'll recognize it, and then we'll start downloading it. But you have to have that in your system. That'd be cool just to have as an option. I know a lot of people will probably just buy it digitally and be done with it, but, you know, options are good. If you have it laying on your shelf and you want to pop it in your PC, that will be neat. And I hope that's what this GameCore stuff leads to, but it sounds like there's a lot of manpower behind GameCore. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from that. But looking at this chart from Brad Sams, looking at all of the stuff that's coming out right now from several different outlets, whether it's WCCF Tech, whether it's Windows Central, whether it's Brad Sams, it does seem like Microsoft is ready for next generation, like to start now. They're ready to go. It's more or less, it seems, it's Sony who also is ready to go, because there are PlayStation 5 dev kits out there, as well as the Scarlett dev kits. But I just don't think the manufacturing and technology is there for a 2019 release. And I do think we're looking at a mid to late 2020 release with what we're hearing about now. So we'll see what happens there. But nonetheless, some very, very interesting developments with Microsoft and the Xbox. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Sony is going to be doing with their next system. And I think it's going to have some stuff to do with VR, since all of these things we're hearing about with Microsoft, none of it has to do with VR. So once again, Sony has kind of taken over that market, and they're by themselves there. So I would like to hear about something VR from Microsoft, but we'll see. Either way, they seem to be getting the systems locked down. It seems like Anaconda is going to be the most powerful system next generation, because they have that lower end system, so they don't have to make a midway point, right? They don't have to be like, well, we have to sacrifice some stuff because it has to fit in this $400 box. Not necessarily. They have the cheaper model, and then they can go all out on the more expensive one because of the cheaper model existing. So I like that being a tiered release, because I'm someone who will buy the more expensive, more powerful one, because I would like my 4K monitor to be able to show me the best experience it can with the Xbox. So let me know what you guys think about this down below. Make sure you guys give the video a like if you liked it, dislike it if not, and I'll see you in the next video.